have turned over to the Monroe County Medical Examiner's Office, and during our search on the 11th, we found what we found to be a disturbance of the ground, which we believed to be animal disturbance, and there we found a shallow grave that was buried about 12 inches. We have not found skeletal remains intact. They were scattered in an area that we found. Again, I didn't release this information last week because yesterday was Selena's 19th birthday. The family was coming into town. I met with them at 2 p.m., advising them what our continued searches have been and what we have found, the skeletal remains. Again, consistent with a child of Owen's age, but we have not positively identified that. We're waiting for the lab results, which will take a couple months to do that. I further didn't disclose anything because yesterday they were doing a service at a church in Marion, and I wanted the family to have some solitude with parishioners there. I didn't want anyone to bother them. And then also they were going to the Joy Road Farm at 6 o'clock to do a vigil. So again, I put out a press release last night to give you folks some proper notice of where to be and why that I have done throughout this investigation that we've done. And then a local newspaper put out, which many of you used as a source of what I just told. Again, I've had conversation with that newspaper to say that I'm not pleased with what he did, that I've been very open and honest with the local press. I have some local press here that I deal with all the time. The Sun and Record, the Lakeshore, the Finger Lakes Times and like that. Those folks deal with me on a daily basis. They know that I'm very open and transparent. And again, I didn't release any information because of what I was concerned with for the family. So I will open this up to any questions that you have, just as I did at the Joy Road Farm when we met on the Hill.
Which remains did you find? Did you find files?
So again, I'm going to rely on our team. I'm going to let District Attorney Mike Clarko answer that question.
Obviously, we're going to wait until we get the results of the lab testing. Once we get those results, as our usual practice, we will compare them with what's in the file, weigh the sufficiency of the facts and the evidence, and then make a decision at that point as to which or where we go from there.
Do you foresee any charges being filed potentially against the person you already have in custody raised?
We won't know that until we collect all the remaining evidence.
I know that he is facing federal charges as well. Has he been kept here the entire time for the past?
He has been here the entire time. He's facing federal charges for illegal entry and forged documents. As you know, he illegally entered the country in 16 and 17, was deported both times, and found his way back here. So there, again, federal charges for illegal entry and forged instruments.
You may have said this already, but that grave that you found, was that near the area of where you guys had found Selena?
It was in about a quarter-mile radius of that, where we found Selena.
All in the same farm, though, correct?
Correct, in the same area.
Thank you.
But you said the remains were scattered. Were there any remains inside that grave?
There were some skeletal remains inside the grave, the shallow grave, yes.
When you say a grave, you were mentioning that we saw possibly an animal was digging there. That grave was dug by a human, not an animal.
So it's our belief that, it's my belief, I'm going to say, that Ray S. buried her here, him there, and that the disturbance we saw was from an animal that was digging at the grave site. Now, I know one of the questions that you would ask is, hey, look, for a 10-day period, you had 1,111 people searching that farm. How come you didn't find them between May 23rd and June 3rd? So I'm going to have a lieutenant of the Forest Rangers. Could you talk a little bit about, the ground cover and what we did there?
Sure. The ground cover at that time, you had tremendous rains on Tuesday of that week,
Yeah.
which creates a lot of ground disturbance. Additionally, the May-apples had come up, and May-apples grow about knee-high. And if you were to drop, say, your cell phone or other small device there, you'd have to hunt around for it even though you just dropped it at your feet. Those kind of things work against us, not to mention cumulative fatigue, both mental and physical, of the searchers, a lot of whom were volunteers from the fire service and the FedSAR teams. So they come out on their own, and after a week of searching, people get tired and worn out, and it gets more and more difficult to find things. We find evidence, small evidence of people that are typically lost on a search and rescue mission, but that's just something they've cast out. This was a particular case where the evidence or the evidence of a crime was hidden intentionally, so it's even more difficult at that point to find it.
I know back in June, we suspended the investigation for a little bit. What made us dip back into it then into August?
That's part of what, when large searches like this one sort of start to wind down, that's part of what's called a limited continuous plan, which we leave with in this case, Sheriff Verst. He had a limited continuous plan to continue to search in that area, which he followed through to his credit, and that's what turned up the evidence.
So I just want to be clear, okay, because it was stated in some media outlets that we had stopped. We never stopped investigating. We never quit.
This was obviously an emotional case for not only you guys who were searching out there, but for the community, obviously this family. Can you just speak a little bit about if this is Owen, maybe just bringing a little bit of closure, if there is such a thing for this family?
Well, when I talked to Hidalgo-Calderon, obviously I had to do it through an interpreter. Her concerns are if it does become to be Owen, which it's consistent with a child that age, obviously they want to do a proper burial. They want to show their respect. So I have concern about that. Again, we're waiting for the lab evidence. I can just say that the community, my partners here, were wonderful.
On that same thing, Sheriff, as far as bringing the family closure and being able to have a burial for Selena herself, are we still waiting on those results from her cause of death?
We have not received a specific cause of death at this time.
Do you know what the holdup for that is?
I do not.
I know when you first questioned Reyes about, he admitted to tampering with her body, but there was no conversation. He wouldn't give any information about Owen. Has that changed since?
He's been represented by an attorney since his arrest, so we're unable to talk to him.
Can you just, I know you mentioned it, but can you just go a little bit more and explain again who found those skeletal remains? The response team that was out there?
Our emergency response team, who was out there on Wednesday, was part of their search detail. Again, we had our ERT team along with our recruits who were in field training, and we ended up, I think, with about 20 altogether. And we did a ground search of the area, and that's where they found some skeletal remains.
How many times before this instance had they searched that plot of land, that specific area?
Well, I can say this, that it was Block 1. It was identified as Block 1 for a reason. That was probably the most, where we probably had the most search, the most people searching was that Block 1. Every single day when we were there through the June 23rd, May 23rd through June 3rd, that block was searched every day. And as Lieutenant from the Forest Rangers stated, the ground cover was very difficult. And when the team was out there Wednesday, if it wasn't for the ground disturbance of that shallow grave by an animal, that's what's kind of brought attention to that area where we found that on Thursday. Some of the skeletal remains were found on Wednesday, and we stayed there Thursday to continue our methodical search.
Are you labeling Selena and Owen's death as suspicious at this point?
Oh, absolutely.
Any idea why they might have been killed?
I can only assume. Again, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We know that there were issues of domestic violence, even though they weren't married. that they were partners, significant others, you may say. And then we have history that there was some incidents of domestic violence, that she had reached out to our local Victims Resource Center. So the only thing that I can assume at this time is that it probably did have something to do with domestic violence.
And Sheriff, would dogs have detected remains in that area? I know you touched kind of about that, and was the area searched with dogs?
Oh, absolutely. The area was searched with dogs, cadaver dogs, several times from May 23rd to June 3rd. Greece PD was out there with their cadaver dog at least 7 times from the time of the search through. They were even out there with us on Thursday. Greece PD was. So dogs were ran through that all the time.
And we spoke on the phone a couple of times in June. You're saying that the investigation was still ongoing. Looking back...
That's the only thing that I said during the summer.
Yeah.
That the investigation was continuing and ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Looking back to June to now, would you ever think that this investigation would have gone so long?
If we hadn't found skeletal remains on Wednesday and Thursday, we'd still continue this investigation until we did this. We didn't quit.
Can you provide any more details about her reaching out for domestic violence help?
I cannot.
Sheriff, you said you were not able to talk to Reyes. If he is deported, will you continue to pursue information from him?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we have times on our side now. There's really no urgency. He's incarcerated again on the criminal tampering of evidence. I'm not sure if a trial date's been set yet or not.
No trial date.
So no trial date's been set, plus the federal charges. So again, you know, the skeletal remains are consistent with a child Owens' age. It's my hope that for closure for the family and for closure of this investigation, to continue this investigation, that it does come back to be that young boy.
Now, back when this all started in May, June, you know, we were first searching for him, was it automatically in your mind a search of recovery, or when did it kind of turn to that?
Well, I think in the first couple of days, you know, our hope was, again, I spoke that, you know, Selena was seeking asylum. She was doing everything right, okay? For our current immigration law, she was doing everything right. She was making her court dates, appearing and everything right. You know, there was some activity by the Border Patrol on the Wednesday, I think going back to the 16th. First off, we thought that, you know, maybe that her and Reyes and the child had fled because of the Border Patrol activity in SOTUS, where an individual had been taken into custody by them. But then as we continued in the investigation, red flags kept going up. You know, the lieutenants became much more suspicious that this wasn't a missing person. When we put the search together, within, I think, 10 or 20 minutes, we found Selena. And then obviously, for a child 14 months old to survive on their own. And I said that when we were up on the hill over the summer, that, you know, my being a dad and a grandfather, so.
If she had reached out for help and there had been complaints, why was he still in her home?
I can't answer that question.
Is there anyone who can?
I don't think there is. You know, domestic violence is, victims don't always leave the first time, the second time. You know, they have hope. In many ways, they're in love with their abuser. And I'm talking generally about domestic violence. It could be financial, it could be emotional control, it could be pets, it could be several other things. You know, one thing that I have done in cooperation with the Victims Resource Center is every day this month I put out a fact about domestic violence on my Twitter account and on the website to educate people about domestic violence. So I can't answer your question specifically.
Had the police gone to that home prior to this?
We had not. We had not been to the Joy Roadhouse at all.
Had she actually called the police, or she just reached out to the domestic?
I don't believe that, my recollection is that we had any records of her calling the police in regards to domestic violence or any other incidents.
Is it harder for someone who has immigration status issues or who's not a U.S. citizen to consider coming forward?
You know, I've been very outspoken about this. Look, I don't care what your race, creed, or color is, okay? What your religion is. If you're a victim, we're going to work hard for you. We don't ask people if they're, immigrants or in the country or for documentation. We're there for law enforcement purposes. I know the state police the same way. We're there to provide a service for people that need help, and that's the service we're going to provide. What ICE and Border Patrol does, that's their business.
Well, that might be exactly what prevents someone from coming forward if maybe they can trust some people in law enforcement and not others for fear of being deported.
So I don't have an answer for the statement that you made.
How has the family that owns the farm been reacting to all of this, and have they been cooperative in telling you things about the relationship possibly?
I would just say that the whole Sodas Center, Sodas community, and the Joy Road, the Joy community has been absolutely fabulous. The farmer's been wonderful. I know that I've been on at least 2 or 3 occasions up there and talked to him personally and some of the neighboring farmers. Lieutenant Croft has joined me. I always thank them for their cooperation, their willingness to let us go on their property to continue our searches without a search warrant or anything else. They've just been very cooperative, and I thank them for that.
And how long, do we know how long Selena has been with Reyes before all this, and how long they lived there?
Do you remember that? Approximately a year. About a year they had been together, but I don't think they had been to the Joy Road Farm for a year. Not at all. Yeah, they were only at the Joy Road Farm, I think, for about 3 weeks.
How far away were these remains from the little boy found from where Selena's body was?
Within a quarter-mile radius.
Would we expect to see you guys still out there? Is there any other part left of this investigation where there'll be a presence out there on that Joy Road location?
We will continue our investigation. I can't say where that's going to lead us, but we're going to continue this investigation until we charge someone.
Any conversation with Owen's biological father in Guatemala?
We have had conversation. Sergeant investigators have interviewed him, and we have had conversation with him. Personally.
Did he have any idea what was going on inside of that home?
No.
Has he been notified about one? Oh, the remains?
No.
Do you have any other thoughts on what happened to this little boy when you say, parts were here, parts were there? Just could that have been animals, or could something really, gruesome happen when he was being killed, if he was killed?
I don't know what the cause of death was to the skeletal remains. I can only assume that the burrowing or the digging in the area where we found the shallow grave, that it was animal activity that kind of spread these around a little bit.
On that, I know you mentioned the deaths were suspicious in nature, but are you classifying these both as homicide?
We are.
So since we don't know the cause of death just yet, we're not sure if he was buried alive or if he was buried dead, or if these are consistent, if the bones are...
I don't know that.
You don't know?
I don't know that. And I hate to even think about that.
And the family, they were talking with you yesterday.
Yes.
Did they have anything else to say that you would want to share? I'm sure this is the worst thing for them, the last thing they wanted to hear.
I don't think I know that in my conversation with Mrs. Calderon that it was very emotional for her. She was concerned about, obviously she wants to do a burial of her grandson Owen, and again I had to stress to her it's consistent that we haven't positively identified that is Owen. She has a hard time grasping how we had so many people out there and weren't able to find them when we were in there in June. I can understand that as a father and a grandfather. I can understand that. But she was with her advocates. We had a good conversation. Again, they were in town because of the church service that they were going to have for Selena's birthday and also the vigil that they were going to have on the farm.
Do we know when we might be getting those results back, if they are compatible?
I don't know, but I would hope within 3 months or so, but I don't know for sure.
And at this time, Reyes is still our only and main suspect at this point?
That is correct.
I mean, during his time incarcerated now, know what kind of conversation he's shown, any remorse for anything at all, or any?
You know, I'm not in the jail facility to view that, nor is it our corrections officers' task, duty, or functions. Their job is to secure and make sure the jail facility is a safe and secure environment. They're not over there to judge, and that's not part of their duties, so I don't have an answer for that.
There might be privacy things involved, but I'm still going back to this, if she had reached out for help, what went wrong? Like, if she reached out for help, are the people who are working in the that she reached out to, are they obligated to let the police know, or?
They are not obligated, okay? I know that they offered her safe housing. She was there for a few days. They offered her safe housing, and she decided to leave. They did everything that they could to offer her safe housing.
Obviously, this is a really, and still is an ongoing investigation. It's been a trying time for everybody. What's it like for you to finally have some kind of sign that we might see signs of Owen?
Well, again, I can only say that the skeletal remains are consistent with a child Owens' age. I have to wait for the lab results to come back. I mean, we can all speculate what our thoughts are, but again, I have to go by the evidence and the facts, and we will continue our investigation. Anything else?
Were there any complaints of domestic abuse that you know of that were aimed at Owen as opposed to his mom?
I have no knowledge. We have no police reports whatsoever that Selena called for law enforcement assistance. None whatsoever.
This may be a hard question for you to answer, but you mentioned that you believe Reyes is the one who dug that grave. What makes you think that he might have done that?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to the trail cams and the pictures that we have on the trail cams, the time that he spent in that woods.
You said you have 5 hours of footage of him there?
That's correct.
Sheriff, I know you said that you don't care who comes forward to report a crime, but has this made you think about the way that the station interacts with the immigrant community and maybe some ways that you can do more outreach with the immigrant community?
I have a great relationship with Wayne County Action for Racial Equality, and they have a lot of interest in our farm workers here. We have between 8,000 and 10,000 farm workers here. Again, I don't think it's our job to go ask people if they have papers or if they're U.S. citizens. If someone calls us for help, it's our job to triumph for victims, and that's what we do. I have a policy that how we deal with people that aren't fluent in the English language and how we handle those folks and how we converse with them. We have a policy. I'm one of the few sheriff's offices in the state that has that policy. Ontario County Sheriff Poverol also has that policy. So again, I don't care what your race, creed, color, national origin, or religion is. You're a human being. If you have an issue, you call the police. We're going to respond to that. And I know that the state police has the same obligation, and they do the same thing.
We've been telling people all month with this Domestic Violence Awareness Month, call. You can call this 222-SAFE. Just call. And this is she called, and there's still something that, I mean, she chose to go back. I know you said that, but if someone chooses to leave a safe place to go back to somebody that is potentially harmful, shouldn't there be another step or another link in there?
You know, I know that our Victims Resource Center here in Wayne County, they do everything that they can to try to convict victims, okay, to leave their abusers. They have safe dwelling houses, they have financial support for them, they have counseling support for them. These folks do a marvelous job. They work with us every single day on domestic violence issues that we have. So again, a lot of this is driven by either the complainant or the victim, and they have a right to choose what they want to do. And many times it's just like, addiction. Many times it's 5, 6, 7, 8 times before they leave.
So maybe the message is beyond calling?
The message is, look, if you see domestic abuse, you should report it. Whether you witness it, if you're someone that you know that is being abused by domestic violence, you should encourage them to get counseling, to go to see somebody.
But why why didn't the domestic violence?
The Victims Resource Center offered Selena all the resources that they could.
But the police had no idea.
We had no idea.
Potential domestic situation.
We had no idea.
Is that something that should be maybe looked at as, so to avoid next time, if somebody leaves the Victims
Well, I'm
Resource
sure,
Center and goes back?
There's no question
you
that,
know?
there's no question that domestic violence counselors and everything, probably, they do encourage people to report. But it's still up to that individual whether they want to report or not.
And just to clarify 100%, just for some of our folks listening back at the station too, the search team was at this location for training purposes or specifically because you're investigating?
It was a training day for the team. They were there specifically for the search.
Was it the dogs that actually found the location?
No, it was deputies.
And you say Selena's remains were found close, when you say
With-
section 1 is the area you looked at in the front of the farm, or where is that?
So where Selena was concealed, because Selena was not buried, where she was concealed, and where the skeletal remains consistent with a child of Owens's age were within a quarter-mile radius of each other.
But both on the farm and in the backside? Or?
They were on the farm. I'm not going to get specific where they were at. Anything else? Thank you, folks.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.